The one from small town.
Stan, yeah, he's been there since
Everett.
I was a kid.
Everett, he's been on he was at White Front, Fort Worth.
All right, everyone, please stand.
That's
I
what
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We thank you all for being here. We have a long list of business to take care of today. And first on the agenda is a public hearing. You want to take it from there?
So we'll call the hearing to order at 7:01 p.m. on this 10th day of December 2018. The hearing is conducted to consider the application filed by Brant M. Wilkins to rezone property at 116 East 3rd Street, Lot 6, and 123 East 3rd Street, Lots 5, 7, and 9, from R2 two-family residential district to C1 general commercial district. The city's Planning and Zoning Commission conducted a hearing regarding this application on November 14th, 2018, and upon motion duly made, seconded, and passed, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted to deny the application for rezoning. Notice of the hearing dates before Planning and Zoning and this board were published in the Herman Advertiser-Courier newspaper. This is intended to be a somewhat formal hearing, similar to a procedure or a trial in court. It is on the record and we have a transcript being prepared. The applicant will have an opportunity to present his case. If there are any documents the applicant desires the board to rely on, he is invited to submit those as exhibits. If the applicant has any witnesses whom he desires to speak on his behalf, this will be allowed. And if the applicant is represented by an attorney whom he wishes to speak on his behalf, this also would be allowed. After the applicant has submitted his position, the board may ask for testimony from others present in the room. And at the conclusion of all testimony and comments, the board may deliberate and then vote. Whether the application is approved or denied will be carried by a vote of the majority of the board members. And the following exhibits have been presented by city staff. We have Exhibit 1, which is the application to change zoning filed by Mr. Wilkins. Exhibit 2 is the affidavit of publication from the Herman Advertiser-Courier newspaper. Exhibit 3 is the notice of public hearing published in the newspaper. Exhibit 4 is the minutes of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting from November 14th, 2018. And Exhibit 5 is the entire municipal code of the city of Herman, Missouri. Exhibit 6 is a petition received by the city. It's called Petition to Reject Brant Wilkins Rezoning Request. Again, that's Exhibit 6. It's signed by various people. And Exhibit 7 are two letters addressed to the Board of Aldermen, one from Marilyn Hanchett and another from Gary Doyle. And if the applicant or his attorney wants copies of any of these, or all of these, I'm sure, we'll be providing those to you. So that's all I've got. Go ahead.
No, I think that there's a tape. Do we have that yet? It's a tape of the full proceedings at the Planning and Zoning meeting, which I would like to receive and get transcribed and put into the minutes as well. And other than that, that's all I have.
Okay, well, this tape or this recording exists only on the Planning and Zoning Secretary's phone at this point. Am I correct about that? So we'd have to get that transcribed or recorded onto some other device.
Correct. Okay, that's the high.
Okay.
Do you want me to accept these until?
Yes, would you accept these into the record, Mayor Herbert?
I do. Okay. I suppose you're speaking for Mr. Wilkins?
To start off, yes.
Well, please give your name and...
Ronald
Okay.
Quentus, Kwentus, and I'm Mr. Wilkins' attorney. And I guess I'll just start with, I've got a couple of these I'll give to the board, and I marked it as Petitioner's Exhibit A, since you were using numbers.
Great.
And I'll just speak about this a little bit first. This is the zoning map of the city of Herman
And I've indicated here with the arrow where Captain Walt is located on East 3rd Street. And then I've also located over here, I think it's by Wen, W-E-I-N Street. Pardon? Wine Street. Where the Herman Hill is located in a all R2 and all 1 surrounding area. And I think that's one of the most significant factors for the board to grant this change of zoning. As I've submitted in Exhibit A here, R2 that's currently zoned on East 3rd Street with C1 zoning at both ends of the street. And then we've got right next door to the Captain Walt is the Vinchester Inn, which apparently has been grandfathered for a C1 use, although it's not listed that way. That's what's been indicated to us at every hearing, and even by His Honor at the hearing, that it was grandfathered in for that use. So that's immediately next door is a C1 use. I think all of the complainants about this request for a change are people that live on East 2nd Street, which is separated from the property by an alley, and many of the properties are fenced in. This is in the middle of basically, it's an island of residential in the middle of a commercial district here. As exhibited on Petitioner's Exhibit A, there's almost 20 blocks of either highway commercial district, C2, or C1, surrounding this area. And then, by comparison, Herman Hills changed to C1 that was granted by this board. Is in the middle of a completely R2 district with nothing commercial around it. Another factor to be considered is the hardship imposed on the property owner compared to the present and existing uses around there. Mr. Wilkins will talk more about this, but I believe he's losing up to $5,000 a week in revenue for uses that he's not being able to do that he would be able to do with a C1 zoning. Let's see here. The C1 zoning of his property that comprised the Captain Walt Inn also includes a building across the street, and I believe there's currently a couple of vacant buildings across the street. Changing his zoning to C1 would help improve the neighborhood with him being able to use that as well. And then finally, I guess I'll say that the commercial bed and breakfast is not unknown to the city of Herman. I think it's a city, a population of 2,300. I believe there's over 45 bed and breakfasts in this town. And at this time, I guess I'll turn it over and let Mr. Wilkins speak about some of the financial hardship that he will suffer if the zoning change is not granted.
Good evening. I'm Bram Wilkins, and I'm here to represent the Captain Walt Inn. As some of you know, the Captain Walt Inn was started in 1986 by Lee and Harry Sammons. My parents, Matt and Kent Wilkins, bought the buildings in 2001. My family has continued to operate the business since then. 2007, my father was diagnosed with cancer. I started helping around the inn. While I had hoped that my mother would be able to successfully operate the inn until sale, it was soon apparent that that would be almost impossible. Cards were stacked against her. The current zoning on our block has had a negative effect on property values and sales, as demonstrated by the long empty buildings right in the middle of the historic district. Historic buildings are also very expensive to maintain. Years of deferred maintenance were starting to catch up at a time when the guests coming to Herman were changing. Marketing to the same customers that were coming to Herman 20 years ago was not generating enough revenue to pay for repairs, maintenance, and utilities. 2011, the Captain Wolt Inn with 4 buildings generated just $137,000 in gross sales, paid about $11,000 in sales and lodging tax. 2011, we had 0 employees. This year with 4 buildings, same number of buildings, will generate about $370,000. We'll pay about $38,000 in sales and lodging tax. We now have 2 full-time year-round employees and up to 8 other part-time employees. And a payroll of about $100,000. Makes me proud to personally create good full-time year-round positions. It also places a responsibility on me, much like the responsibility that you have, where you have to weigh certain things and the potential good versus bad on certain situations. I have a responsibility to my employees. Mary Bickmeyer has been a long-time Herman resident. Al Falco, who is a Herman resident. They're some of the hardest working, most capable people in our town. It's also for the residents of Herman. As the Captain Wolt does better, so does my employees, as they should, and so does the town. As our revenue has increased, we have continued to invest in our buildings and in Herman. We have remodeled 4 or 5 buildings since 2012 and created a horticultural oasis in our garden. We have added 4 new roofs, 4 new HVAC systems, tuck pointed 2 buildings, and remodeled each of our guest rooms. That's money that's been spent throughout town. Since 2011, we have invested more than $400,000 in our properties. We currently have plans to invest another $200,000 in our last building to remodel and another $50,000 in our garden. In our current situation, we are forced to compete with other businesses, which because of some hodgepodge of zoning laws or favoritism by the mayor, or allowed uses we have been sued for, and or granted zoning changes without any objections. We believe it to be discriminatory and damaging not only to my business, but to the city as a whole. There are empty buildings on 3rd Street that don't make sense economically for residents. The only way those buildings are going to get paid for are with buildings, businesses. I think you can talk to a few people that have recently remodeled buildings, and they're much further over budget than they thought. We're talking about my street, the 100 block of East 3rd Street, that's surrounded on 3 sides by commercial zoning. 4th Street's commercial, Market's commercial, Schiller's commercial. Captain Wolt Inn, that sits right next to the Vinchester Inn, one of our competitors, that has all of the uses of a C1 property. At night you can hear music from Tin Mill Brewery and smell the grease from the restaurants that back up to our property at 116 East 3rd Street. Not only are we surrounded on 3 sides by C1 zoning, our block, the 100 block of East 3rd Street, has 16 properties. Of those, 8, or 50% of them, currently have a business license, and 4 of them are vacant. With all 4 properties on the corner of the street being zoned C1, and half of the other properties carrying a business license already, the current use of the block is already commercial. So we have all the bad without the good of added revenue. What we would like to be able to do is exactly what we are doing on a slightly larger scale. We currently serve 40 to 60 guests a day on a weekend. We would like to increase that number to about 100 people a day. As more and more B&Bs stop serving breakfast, there clearly is a need in town. And if you've taken the time to read our reviews, you know that Mary and Al make the best breakfast in town. We would also like to open our gardens to other guests on weekend nights to enjoy our music. We had a great response since adding music. Our guests love it. with many commenting on how nice it is. We have also had neighbors who come over and enjoy the music every week, as well as seen guests from other B&Bs sit outside at their B&B to listen to our music. Unfortunately, we have also had to turn away guests staying at other inns and B&Bs. It just doesn't seem very hospitable in a town that tourism is so important to. We also feel it is a shame that currently guests staying at other B&Bs and inns aren't able to experience the incredible desserts that Mary Now make and the wonderful experience of music in our garden. We do realize that change is scary to some. Unfortunately, with an ever-increasing budget, I believe it's over 19 million, we cannot discard new ideas that will generate more tax revenue for the city with very little negative impact to neighboring properties. Many of the surrounding properties, as I've mentioned, already have a C1 zoning, and we would not be doing anything differently than we already are. We serve breakfast already. We have music on weekends. So I do have a drawing of what we would like to expand the garden, which would actually give us a fence here along the alley, which would protect neighbors from noise. It would also do that on the west side of town, along Cheryl's house. It also adds a whole bunch of trees right here. Because of the consent decree that we have with the city and the mayor, we have had to keep our music south of this building here. Because of that, it has channeled the music directly towards her house, unfortunately for her. But that's what happens when you move the music away from the mayor's house there. So we have to keep it away from the mayor's house. So this plan would let us spend about $50,000 to $100,000 improving our garden, creating something that would be wonderful for town, something that would bring people into town, create more jobs and revenue. If you think maybe 50 to 100 people on breakfast, talking about $1,500 a day, $3,000 a weekend. That's 3 instead of the 5 that he said, but you add in desserts and you're at the 5. Very little change to what we're already doing. We have music. We do desserts on Friday nights. We have fire pits. I know those things have upset some people, but we have worked hard. We have gone through 2 or 3 sound systems. We have added speakers so that the total volume can be reduced so that we have speakers throughout the property. We have added lighting so that we can turn off the string lights that seem to be a problem. Brian, I know at the planning and zoning you said that I have not wanted to negotiate, but David, I think you can attest to the fact that I've sent you many emails. Would you like to negotiate now? Can we negotiate? The only thing I would like to have now is it needs to be in public, or it has to have multiple people. We've had discussions that were reneged on. I've done what I can. I've been a very good neighbor. I've actually worked with neighbors and come to agreements. And then the mayor came in and got them all riled up, and they fought me on other things. So a compromise is both sides giving. There still is a compromise. I'd be willing to do it. Or we can go through what we're going through. No changes to what we do. We make breakfast, we have music. So I think if the city would be willing to work with us, we could come to an understanding, come to an agreement that makes all sides happy. Or you just get people that continue to fight, maybe don't tell the truth when they're walking around town telling things, maybe don't tell the truth even when they're in court. And that's very hard for a businessman to compete with, and it's not a fair thing to do. That's all I have to say. I will answer questions if you have any.
I guess we'll mark this as Exhibit B.
Okay. Thank you.
Could I ask 2 questions?
Sure.
So what is it that you're opposed to? Can we work through those things? And do you consider added revenue to the city at all when making this decision? Those are the 2 things I would like answers to.
Well, thank you, Brent. I appreciate that. We're not really here for that purpose. The purpose that we're here for is to decide whether or not to grant and change the zoning of your property from residential to commercial. And there's a couple things that I think I would like to say first. Then the aldermen will all, I'm sure, have something to say. First of all, to Mr. Quintus, the property next door, the Winchester, is not commercial, it's residential. And having a business license doesn't make a property commercial. I think that's some fallacy too. The two properties that are three properties, actually there's four properties right across the street from Mr. Wilkins. And he referenced those, so I'm going to talk about those for a minute. Those properties were vacant for years and years and years and years. They weren't economically feasible. I talked to the owner of the Winchester, and he said somebody should buy them and make them into a guest house. And I said, why don't you do that? He said, well, you can never make any money on it. As much money as you'd have to put in it, it wouldn't be economically viable. There's only one thing that makes those properties economically viable to rehab and to fix up. They're beautiful properties, part of Herman's history, architectural history. But the only thing that's ever going to get them fixed up is somebody that wants to come in, regardless of how much money they put on into it, and restore those properties for personal use. And that's what's happening. There's four properties, three of the four are now being rehabbed as residences. And that street is moving not towards commercial, but is actually moving towards residential, the way it used to be. So that's one thing. Mr. Wilkins said we have a $19 million budget. We do not have a $19 million budget. We have a $12 million budget. The budget was given out in June and passed by this board, and copies of it have been given to several people, and the budget is $12 million. It's measured in revenue. That's how it's done, $12 million. So it's not $19 million. Anyway, we did not sue Mr. Wilkins. We brought an injunction against him to stop commercial activities in a residential neighborhood. And basically, that's what I have to say at this point, just kind of correcting some things that I think were misleading.
Can I ask you, Your Honor, for my clarification on the Winchester Inn, do they not have 11 rooms?
I don't know how many they have, but they were operating as a hotel before zoning came in.
And when was that, sir? What year?
Zoning came in what, 95? And they were operating...
And was the Captain Walt not operating as an inn in 95?
It wasn't owned by Mr. Wilkins.
But was it operating as an inn?
I don't know.
Okay.
I doubt
And is a bed and breakfast permitted to have 11 rooms?
No.
Okay. So if the Winchester had 11 rooms, it would be in violation of its, you're telling me it's not
If
coded?
it were a bed and breakfast, it could not be a bed and breakfast and operate 11 rooms.
Okay. So is it operating as an inn?
It's a hotel.
Okay.
That's a separate...
But it's operating as a hotel in a C...
In an
Or
R2,
in an
because
R2.
it was grandfathered in.
Okay.
Okay? And also, I think in the hearing...
And that's immediately next door, is that right, sir?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
also, I think at the last hearing at the P&Z, I believe you made a statement that all the contingent properties to the Captain Walt were all commercial. And that's not true either. In fact, none of them are commercial. So, that, just to clear the record, that's...
Okay, but both ends of that block are commercial, is that correct, sir?
Practically every block in Herman has some commercial activity within a block. But we...
But can I ask you, sir, does you approved for Herman Hill to be commercial to C1, is that correct?
Yeah, and I think...
Is there any commercial around that, sir?
Well, the man owns all the lots. You see, it's not the same thing.
He owns all the lots on...
He has 50
Every
lots.
street
roughly
over there?
50 lots. And so when we sent out notices for everybody within 185 feet, he got all the notices because he owns all the property.
So what
it's
about
completely
185 feet beyond the property he owns?
There was
No.
only 4 lots rezoned.
Okay.
It's only...
And that's all R1 around there, is that right?
Yes, he owns all that.
Okay,
It
so-
might be R2,
So
I'm
you,
not sure.
you commercial, or you changed his zoning to C1, but it's still surrounded by R1, is that correct?
It's not surrounded by R1. He sits right on the edge of city limits.
Okay, so the part that's not part of the city is not R1, is that what you're saying, sir?
Yeah, we don't have anything to do with
Okay.
You
it.
said surrounded, he's not surrounded.
Okay. Within your jurisdiction, he's surrounded by R1, is that
I'm
correct?
not sure what the zoning is, correct?
But he owns it all.
He owns
So
all.
it's a vast.
He doesn't own the entire city, though.
He
Right
owns-
next to his property,
he
there's
owns
currently R1, is that?
46 lots or something up there. He came in here and he showed on a map what he wanted to do. And basically, he owns the property that could possibly be affected. That's not the same with your client. Your
So,
client-
Your Honor, I'm trying to figure this out.
If
You're
you-
telling me he doesn't have any neighbors? There's
If
no
you'll-
one next
if
to
you'll
him?
let me finish.
Okay.
Okay? He owns the property that surrounds him for lot after lot. There's no real streets through there. Those streets have never been completed. He built his own streets up there. Whereas your client has two pieces of property with the 3 half lots, and right in the middle of a bunch of commercial people that have signed a petition saying that they don't want this to go commercial. So I don't see anything even remotely comparable.
Okay.
Does anybody else? I hope I didn't step on anybody. Do
Well,
you have questions?
Yeah, generally when we do a rezoning, we take it case by case. We don't really compare to other cases as well because.
Well, I'm
know,
just
we
telling you,
have-
Mr. Cooley, the legal factors that you're supposed to look at are the uses to which the surrounding property is being put.
And what C1 is allowed to do, what you're allowed to do in C1. That's what we look at also.
Right.
Because it doesn't matter, if we approve a zoning change and he sells the property tomorrow, a new owner can come in and put whatever's allowed in C1 on those lots.
Right.
Are you aware of
And
what's
that's another
allowed?
thing that we do. That's another thing that we.
Well, I would tell you that's not a legal consideration that you're supposed to look at. It's how it affects the neighboring property and the uses to which the property is being put.
Well, I think that in time immemorial, this Board of Aldermen had always looked at that. And we're interested in our city and what's going to happen to it. When we put a commercial lot, we make a commercial lot out of a residential lot, and the man says he's going to do such and such on it, he could change his mind next week and put a bar or anything else in there.
Did you get a guarantee from Herman Hill that they're not going to change ownership?
He owns all, I keep saying this.
Well,
He owns all the
Mr. Wilkins owns his
He
property
doesn't
too.
own all the property around him. He doesn't own 40 lots around him.
Obviously, the Herman Hill property stops somewhere. At one point, it stops at the edge of the
Okay.
city's jurisdiction. At the other point, it stops at R1, residential.
Maybe I can explain this better then. He only has to rezone 4 lots. All the rest of the lots that he owns are not rezoned.
Within his
So
property.
the edge of his C1 property is well within the 40 lots that he owns.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm clear on that now. Okay, that makes more sense.
Okay, anybody, Brian,
No, I just want to hear what everybody else has to say and then
okay.
I'll speak later.
Dave,
No, I'm good at the moment.
anybody down there?
Not at this point.
Okay, does anyone want to speak on this matter that's in the audience now? Nancy?
Satre, S-A-T-R-E. So, when Mr. Wilkins bought this property, or he didn't buy it, when he took over for his mother, he knew it was in historic R2 zone. He's repeatedly attempted to change the zone for the property. Rezoning this property opens up a multitude of commercial businesses that it could be used for, most of which would affect the residents and their properties negatively. The property is also for sale, raising even more concern over what it could be used if it was sold. The music being played during the day and night is often uncomfortably loud, to the point it can be heard inside my home, several properties away. Mr. Wilkins shows a lack of concern for his neighbors who live near his property and for the guests staying at neighboring small bed and breakfasts, many who have come to Herman for the quaintness, not loud music. And I just would like to also add that I take offense to the fact that Brant, you know the music is too loud over at my house. I take offense to that.
Miss June lives closer and she says it's not loud.
She's 90 years old and maybe she doesn't hear as well, but I hear it in my home. So parking on East 3rd Street is a challenge now. It would be completely impossible with a zone change to this property. Mr. Wilkins has quoted in the Herman AC as saying, "No one is going to tell me what I can do." And many of my neighbors asked the board to protect one of the Herman's oldest streets and preserve Herman's heritage and turn this down. And I'd also like to add that as far as him having a word that means anything, his pit bull runs loose in my yard a couple times. It's been down the alley, it's growled at me. By the time I get my camera out, it's gone. And then police go to him and he says, "It's in the kennel." So that just goes to show the kind of person who's such a wonderful neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Do we have anyone? Rich, do you want to speak?
Yeah, I'd like to.
Okay.
Are we giving
I
people
don't
3
really
minutes?
like to, but. here we go.
Yes, Nancy.
She was at 2.
Excuse me?
She was only under 2 minutes. Do you want to give her a 3?
But you know who it is, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, Rich. We've got, go ahead and get started. And
You
we'll-
got 3 minutes. What's your last name?
My last name is Lauer, Lauer, first name Rich.
I was at the planning and zoning meeting, and I just thought, I was going to write something else up, but I thought, well, let's stay with the program and say the same thing to you that I did to them, and then I'll add a couple of quick notes. I'm here representing 25 individual property owners listed on the petition in front of you. I don't know if you have the petition here or not. There was 2 extra ones added on there, was 23. This is fairly simple. Brent at the Captain Wolt Inn wants to change the intended use of the property to benefit himself and possibly a few others. He would like to violate existing zoning to expand his operation despite the inconvenience of his neighbors. The intentions of zoning, we know, is to preserve the rights of adjoining property owners, including protecting their investments, as well as residential standards of peace and quiet. An unwanted change in zoning is unacceptable to my neighbors and myself. A moral outrage. Spot zoning, in this case, an attempt to rezone property in the middle of a street zoned R2, is, and I quote, an unacceptable method for making changes in a zoning ordinance that violates the structural integrity of a zoning system. This is a quote from the Urban Lawyers, Volume 48, page 246. A more intensive use of that property, which I remind you is for sale, would open yet another gate allowing C1 zoning to soon be introduced into your own backyards. The neighbors have asked the mayor, basically they've asked the mayor to represent them. He was not ever attacking on his own. Also a resident of this neighborhood, to protect them from this situation, which has created unwarranted controversy and criticism of the residents and the mayor living here. Every year, he has caused new turmoil in our neighborhood. He has the potential to be a great neighbor, business owner, and an asset to the community. We send this message. We wish to continue living in a residential-only neighborhood. Beyond that, here's my little notes for tonight. C1 zoning allows louder businesses, more traffic, and more off-street parking. C1 zoning, in this case, tempts others wanting to inflict businesses in other residential areas. It is the demise of the zoning system. Zoning dictates civility toward others. Just say no, thank you. Not losing revenue. Brett was talking about revenue. He's talking about losing revenue. He's not losing revenue, he's just not making more. There's no possible parking enough. In C1, it requires a certain amount of parking per table. And he doesn't have enough parking hardly for the people he has there. There's no more. Okay, I don't mind stretching.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Is there anyone else that wants to speak that's here? Okay. We have, I think that is there any other discussion that the board would like, any questions they'd like to ask Mr. Wilkins? I would point out that he does own a C1 property on Market Street, and he wouldn't need to rezone this if he has to help him compete. He already owns the property, and that's always an option, is to carry these activities down there where it's already one of 100 permitted uses.
Might I reply to that?
Yeah, Brad, Please do.
Okay, so I do own a C1 property, and it's on Market Street, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to have a lot of people walking across a state highway that's dark. It also, when you really get down to it, because that is exactly the argument that I think we ought to think about per town. If I can do it at the Blue House, 3 houses over are the other properties. So what he's saying is, don't do it by my house, but send it to the Blue House and hurt all the people that live over there. It's 3 houses different. Do you see where that is just a little bit hard to wrap my head around?
Brad?
That side of Market Street is a quieter neighborhood. It doesn't make sense, but that is what I'm being pushed to do. When it makes sense to do it in the historic district where more properties are zoned commercial. That is truly the decision that I'm asking you guys to make right now. The Blue House, which he just said I could do, or the Yellow House. Which one makes more sense for town?
Brent.
Yes, sir.
First of all, no, thank you. Thank you. The house that's zoned commercial is on a street of commercial properties. People cross the street all the time on Market Street. It's not just in front of your house that they cross. So the idea that we would have people crossing the street as a dangerous situation does not hold up. The fact is, it's already zoned. It's quieter, not on Market Street. Market Street is one of the loudest places that there is. There are huge trucks driving up and down, semi-trucks, gravel trucks, cement trucks, all kinds of truck activity, as well as people. So it's really not quiet. So there's that.
Your Honor, can I ask you about Market Street? Is that just half a block away from the property that we're asking to be rezoned?
Yes.
Okay.
And also, so is Chiller. There are a lot of streets. If you want to have a commercial activity out by the supermarket, or either the supermarket or Alco, there's a lot of residential places there that are a half a block from commercial streets. We only have 2 square miles, about 2 1/4 square miles in Herman.
And how much of that is commercial, sir?
You said, how much, what did you say? You said 20 blocks of it?
What I'm looking at here on Exhibit A in blue looks like about 1/3 of the city.
Okay, well, then there's 1/3 of the city that somebody could already buy and start a guest house. And he already owns one. So it's, just a second, Brad.
Sure. Go ahead.
Would you sit down until I'm finished? Thank you. So that doesn't I don't quite understand that. The idea that it's noisier on the side of 3rd Street is primarily according to the people that have spoken because of some of your activities. So, well, what we really need to do is keep commercial activities in commercial streets and residential activities in residential streets. And that's what this whole thing has been about.
And I would just like to speak on that subject in particular, because it is three houses. We are talking 3 houses difference.
It's a lot more than that, actually. It's about 6 lot widths.
And across the largest street in town.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you do here, residents, so you try to balance the good versus the bad. And what you hear is, traffic being bogged down there does seem to affect a lot of residents. Adding more to right there, more parking, more of that doesn't make sense. And again, I completely understand one is zoned commercial and one is zoned R2. But you people are the ones that can change that. And if it makes sense to you, do we want to start proactively protecting an area, minimizing the impact of tourism? But we have to define that area. But when you do that, you also have to take an area and you let tourism go there. And east of Market, we truly have that area. And he talks about all these other commercial properties we have that are viable. I will walk with any of you tomorrow morning to find those. And here's the thing, and this is what I love about Herman, and it is what brings people here. It is our historic district. And if you start moving our commercial stuff out of that historic district that we have that is special and that is great, you move it away from there into strip malls down by Alco and all those places, we're no different than any other big town. And those tourists, do they want to go to strip malls in Herman? That isn't what truly is going to move our town forward. You guys right now have an opportunity to do something for the town that would be great. It's not just my properties. You ought to think about the streets east of Market. There's 5 of them, and half of those properties have a business license already. The current use is that people moving into that area do know that. Your neighbor across the street, Brooke and Tim, moved from St. Louis into that neighborhood, 2 houses from the mayor, because they wanted to be in the middle of that. People are well aware of what is in that area. It is a commercial use already.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The historic district is a historic district, and there are limitations in that district as to what's supposed to be there. It also is a district that has the major shops, and always has had. Schiller, Market Street was at one time the major. Schiller, 4th Street, and 1st Street. And in between, we had residential until we started having floods, and we had to close some of that down, which was down by Gutenberg. So we're well aware, Brent and everyone, about how this works. And the fact of the matter is that you're requesting a rezoning that would, do you have the list of what could go in there, Brian?
No, we went over it at planning and zoning. It's a long list of commercial retail establishments, but
none that belong there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you talk about something being special downtown. If you listen to what the members of planning and zoning said, is this area of residential is what makes downtown special. You have the commercial mixed with residential. You have these 2 blocks right there, R1 block and R2 block, that we need to preserve, that we need to maintain as residential. And then further down East 3rd Street, it's residential, R1 and R2 as well. So, you know, what we want to do at the planning and zoning level is to protect this area, and this would be one step in that direction of protecting what is special about Herman, which is our old residential houses in that area, and not turn them into an unlimited commercial use area.
We also have one of the ladies that wrote a letter that said that if we do complete this and rezone this commercial, she's going to stop the rebuilding of her Victorian home. She's not interested in living there.
Where does she live, Your Honor?
Right across the street from Mr. Wilkins. And
On 2nd Street?
On 3rd Street.
On 3rd Street?
And she said she can hear that. I'd like to.
What's her name, sir?
I'm looking for it right now. I think I have it. Right. Her name is Marilyn Hansen. She's the owner of 124 East 3rd Street. And she says, and I'll paraphrase here, I need to know if this request is approved, Mr. Wilkins intends to manage a commercial operation in the center of the block without disrupting his residential neighbors, especially during the weekends. As I have read online in the Herman newspaper, lighting and noise are already ongoing issues at this business, and I fear, frankly, that rezoning will only add rather than detract from this problem. This is particularly relevant for me since I am in the process of significant updates to my 3rd Street residence and plan to use this as my retirement home. The front portion of my house is already vulnerable to the noise generated in the yard of the Captain Wolf Inn. If the business is rezoned commercial and a liquor license then sought, I fear I would be forced to relocate. Outdoor beer gardens are noisy, even rowdy places, even without amplified music. And so those houses are being renovated as private residences, which will only add to the beauty and ambiance of our city, and certainly not detract from it.
Speaking about private residence, Your Honor, how many are on 3rd Street?
Yeah.
How many private residences are on that street?
Well, I think there are people that have primary residences in practically every one of them.
But are there 4 people that have primary residence on that entire block?
No. There's 2, 3, 4, and Mr. Wilkins lives there, but there's Nancy. Yeah, the entire street, except the entire
So
street.
we've come up with 5 now, sir?
No, if you don't mind.
Okay.
There's 4 houses that aren't inhabited yet, but 3 are in the process of being residents, so there's 3. How many houses are on there? 10?
16.
No, there's not 16.
So we're saying 3 out of 10 then, or?
No, I would say that it's probably 8 or 9 out of 10. Here's the map. Why don't you count?
The lots, I don't know how the lots
It looks like 10 to
lay out.
Okay, that's 3rd Street, so there's, the caps are commercial, so actually there's people living in those too. And then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are all residences. And then on the other side, there's the health department, and then 6, 7, 8, 9. Don't think that one is. Then 10, 11.
So of those
There's
11, Your
11
Honor,
or
how many are
12.
currently habited?
That's what I'm saying. Those are all inhabited. People actually live there. They may run a bed and breakfast, but remember, part of the definition of a bed and breakfast is it must be the owner's primary residence and he must reside there. So by definition,
Not in R2, not in R2. You don't have to live in R2, no sir.
Yeah, this is for bed and breakfast.
they're running a bed and breakfast
The definition of bed and
branch,
breakfast.
so they have to live there. If their license is a guest house, they'd have to have more than 4 rooms. So it's not, it's not what you think.
So of those, how many are not being used as bed and breakfasts?
Brant, they went Winchester, the vacant one, the lot that has a parking lot on it, that's right across the street from it, and I don't know. The rest of them are. It's not a commercial street by any stretch.
But it has 2 residential houses that are not, there's only 2 that are not bed and breakfasts or something else.
Well, if you count the 3 that are being built as private residences, there's 3 right there.
They're not inhabited.
Okay, so that makes 5 then.
Yeah, 5 or 6 out of 10.
Out of 10, so half of them.
And
maybe
then,
over.
then you want to add the bed and breakfast. So, I mean, I think that we're really arguing over how many angels can dance on the head of a pin here. There is only 1 guest house that I know of that's on that street, and 1 hotel out of 10 or 12 lots. So
And
the rest
currently 2 residents that aren't guest houses or bed and breakfasts, and 3 that are being built that you talked about.
No, there's more than that. The one on the south side is also. I think we're.
Well, we can agree there's 10 lots on the street, on both, 5 on each side of the street. Is that what we just talked about?
10 or 12. There's 12, isn't it?
Well, I don't know.
12 lots altogether
It's
on
hard
both
for me to
sides
tell from that.
Yeah.
But there's only 2 that are not either private residences or a guest house or a motel, hotel.
But how many are only private residences? I think
5, 6, half of them probably.
4. Well, wait a minute, we just talked about
Well,
this. You
3
just
of them-
identified.
I don't think it matters what, I don't think it matters.
Okay, but we have that in the record, that there's a total of 12 lots on this street.
There's probably 16 lots on the street if you count Brandt as 3 wide.
So 16,
I mean,
and of those 16, 2 of them are only residences, the rest are either inns or bed and breakfasts or vacant.
No, that's not true.
4.
I've said this over and over. And I
A
think
B&B, if it's a B&B, they live there.
Probably
It's
4.
4.
Okay, so it's 4. All right,
Possibly.
plus the 3
Plus
that are
the
going to
3
be,
coming out.
so that's
Not
7.
inhabited.
so that's 7 of the 16,
They will be.
not even half.
Well, that's, might not be half, sir, but none of them, all of them are private residences for the people that live there. They must be their primary residence. So there's another 4 or
Right,
5.
but they also run
So
businesses
you've
there.
got, but it has to be,
It's a residential business.
Okay,
They're not restaurants, they're not entertainment
Right.
venues, they're residential businesses.
they don't carry on.
but
with
they're not
people.
R1.
Doesn't matter if it's R1. It can be R2. R2 can have any use that is allowable in R1. And they choose to have a bed and breakfast instead of a guest house because it's their primary residence. Brandt doesn't have to live there. He doesn't have to live there. He can still operate his business and not live there. These other people must live there, and it must be their primary residence. So you're talking about 3/4 of them, really?
Right.
Okay. As long
But
as
over
that's-
half of them are running businesses there.
Yes, and the guy across the street has a lawn service too, and he has a business license. So he takes calls there, then we have an attorney that's across the street. There's all kinds of... On Second Street. So yes, it's allowable, and that's commonplace in Herman for a person to have, and they have to have a permit. They must have a permit.
All right,
Okay?
thank you, sir.
All right. Anything else anybody
Yeah,
wants?
there's one thing that bothers me, Brent. You just made a comment about moving to Market Street. You want me to go over and hurt them people instead of staying where I'm at. So doesn't that imply that you're hurting the people where you're at?
No, because it is far.
Well, I mean, you just made that
Sure,
statement.
sure. And
Am
so-
I correct?
sure.
I mean-
And so the thing is truly, because where 10 Mill is and where the amphitheater is, as you know, because you can hear it at your house, those places already get noise. So I'm saying we're already getting some of the bad things. So why not increase the revenue? If you move it to Market, you just drag it further across town.
I'm just making a comment about what you said.
But, no, and I'm saying, again,
Hurt them.
yes, sir, and I'm saying to now use your head and go past that. You're saying you're trying to avoid the spread of commercial activities, but you're actually spreading it by doing that. That's what doesn't
The
make
river's already there,
sense.
so we might as well put a casino on it because it's better money.
I
That doesn't make any
hadn't asked
sense.
that question, it just hit me that way.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Mike Langdon.
Oh, Mike. State your name so she can...
Mike Langell, Langille. I just wanted to make one statement in defense sort of the Planning and Zoning Commission and how the things differ from there to now. I mean, it was just a few days, a couple of weeks. At the Planning and Zoning meeting, he was begged many times to state his purposes of why he wanted to change his zoning. He had nothing, had no idea. It never came up with why. And now today, because of that, he didn't have that. Now he has a picture that he's drawn of what it is that he wants to do. It seems sort of, I mean, that just came up between the P&Z meeting and tonight.
And
Would that have changed your mind if you had it at the P&Z meeting?
If he would have had an answer, it might very well have changed some people's minds. He didn't.
Okay.
I think that one thing that's very important here to deliberate, and I think our aldermen know about this, and so should everyone else, that if a property is zoned commercial, C1 or C2, that the zoning stays with the property, and if it's ever sold, and this property is for sale, then that would forever be a C1 property. And that any owner, even the current owner, or any subsequent owner, can change the use of that to any allowable use in C1. Now, if he wants alcohol and other things, he has to have other permitting. But there are 100 already approved uses from all kinds of things, tin mill shops and body shops and blacksmith shops and lumber yards and all kinds of things that would not be suitable in either a residential neighborhood or a neighborhood that that is in the historic district. So that has to be considered by this group, because we're not just looking for a promise tonight, but we're looking for what could potentially happen in the future. So that's all I have. I'm done. And does anybody else want to talk? Or do we...
I didn't. You know, one of the things is talking about how it would affect the neighborhood and the people around it and everything. Actually, 2 days ago was my 4th anniversary of sitting down in this chair. Didn't realize that, but I wanted to clear up one little fallacy on this. It's been stated several times, and no matter how many times we tried to shut it down, it keeps getting repeated that this whole thing started when this mayor took office. Before my butt got warm in this chair, I had people calling me about the Captain Wolden and Mr. Wilkins. A lot of the people that talked to me's names are on this petition. 4 years ago, not 2.5, 4 years ago. I'm happy that these people finally stood up to be counted and did this. This piece of paper is not supposition. It's not a conspiracy. It's not the mayor's picking on me, and it ain't hearsay. This is fact. The people in that neighborhood stood up to have their voice heard, and what they said was no. I just want to make that very clear. 25 people that live in that area around that property said they do not want this to happen. I'm done.
Anybody else? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion to follow the planning and zoning recommendation and deny the request for zoning change.
Second.
I have a motion that's made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you.
Let's go off the record just for a second.
Wait for Board of Adjustment.
They meet as scheduled. We don't have a regular meeting, but let's talk and check. I think to appeal from here, you go straight to circuit court.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if your process had appealed to Board of Adjustment or not.
Right.
Okay, we'll talk. All right.
Okay. The next item, she's done, right?
Okay, back on the record?
Okay.
Okay, we can go off the record. We're done.
Hey, that's where we're working.
Okay. Okay. The mayor's report, I think, is next. And thanks, everybody, for coming. I appreciate your input.
It's always good seeing you.
While the court reporter is packing the things, I'll just give a brief report. You may have read my mayor's report in the newspaper last Wednesday, and basically it talked about having a lot going on, but not much strife or, well, I guess we had our share tonight, but anyway, usually when things seem quiet in the neighborhoods, that means the opposite of what you think. It really means a lot's going on. And I went through all the stuff that was going on, and I'll be heading Thursday to the MRPC meeting where they handle grants. I'm going to specifically look into the grant for help with buildings that are historic in nature and so forth. And I'll try to get all the rules for that, because I've had a couple of people interested in that. It's fantastic if we can get it to work. I noticed in the newspaper that Kathy Utley mentioned that we're focusing on one street, which is 18th Street, and that we should maybe consider other streets, and that she thought that we should take the easiest streets first, the ones that require less infrastructure repair, and it would be most cost-effective to work on. And I think it's those are great ideas. We can't disagree with that, and I appreciate her putting it in there. I really do, because it brings it to everyone's attention. The idea of doing the easy streets first, I would say we've been doing that since 2016. So for 3 years we've been doing that, 2016, 2017, and 2018. And so we think it's a good idea, and we're actually been doing it. The idea of fixing more streets than just 18th Street. 18th Street is expensive. It was originally on the budget for 2016 to do pieces of it, and we actually took that out so we could do the easy streets. But it's very important for fire service to the hospital, for ambulance service to get to the hospital, for people to go to the hospital for various checkups and so forth, and the clinic, to get to the police department. It's just a very, very vital street that we have here, and as everyone knows, it's in horrible condition. It's very bad. I wouldn't want to be on a, what do you call it, Bruce, a flat board?
On a backboard. If you're in the back of an ambulance on a backboard, you're already there for a reason, and riding on a bumpy road does not help your situation.
And it's not just bumpy. It's worse than bumpy. It's bumpy squared or something. I mean, it is a mess. And so we know that. And it just, we've put it off through 3 years, and now we're trying to start. We won't be able to do this in 1 year. We don't have the funds to do it in 1 year. And let me speak just a bit about, I have a nice report written out, but rather than read it, let me tell you. Fixing these streets is extremely expensive. To fix one block, we have 22 miles of streets here. And not all of them need to be fixed. Some of them only serve a few people. But to fix a block of street costs $30,000. To fix a block of curb and gutter, the edges of the street, on both sides costs $42,000. Now this is for a block. There's 8.8 blocks in a mile, and we have 22 miles. And nothing, virtually nothing, has been done due to lack of money. We have patched and worked and spent all of our money for every year from way back before my time. But you can see we're not going to be able to do that on $150,000 a year. We just can do 2 or 3 blocks, 4 blocks, half a mile at the most under ideal conditions, and we can't catch up. So that's one of the reasons why we're not jumping on all the streets at one time. The other thing I think is that we need to, Mark is working on a chart that will not only prioritize the streets from easy to difficult and everyone in between, but also will factor in the amount of vehicle traffic that they get. And anyway, that's all of that needs to be taken into consideration. We're going to have some kind of, we're going to have to hit the lottery or have some kind of J. Paul Getty or somebody's relatives for us to do all these at one time, or do some other way to develop a plan so we can systematically chip a little bit at a time. And right now we don't have the money to even chip. So that's unfortunately the way it is. We're doing well with everything else. Our utilities are still, well, they will close the year out as profitable. We don't have $19 million of budget. We have $12 million of budget, as measured by revenue. And that is not all available to streets. About 10 million of that is basically part of our utilities, which has to be used for utilities, or it's a restricted account like parks, where money comes in and has to be used for parks, something like that. We have about $2 million that is called general fund, and we can spend that. Of that, this past year, about 500,000 is for administration. That's what they administer the $12 million, and make sure that we have policemen and that everybody's health insurance and insurance is paid and so on and so forth. We have $900,000 that goes to the police department. We have $400,000 that goes to dispatch. And that's a little higher than usual because we bought a bunch of equipment because we had to, radios and so on and so forth. When it all is said and done, the street department, after they pay salaries, insurance, and so forth, have about 140 or 150,000. Some years 10 or 20 more, some years 10 or 20 less. But that's all we have. And we are running the city the best we can. These 4 people up here, and Mark, and Trish, and everyone are doing an outstanding job of getting every penny they can out of our budget. They were like Swift and Company said, we get everything out of the pig but the squeal. Well, that's what we do. And it's really a good thing to work with these people, so I appreciate it. And I'm going to come back to streets again because it's actually on our agenda. So the newspaper thing, article was very appropriate and timely. That's what I have.
She doesn't speak for me or the paper. That's her own opinion.
It was in her, let me clarify that, that was in her Kathy's form, which is her opinion.
Which I don't edit at all.
Right. But, okay, Mark, what do you have?
No, just a few things. Continuing to work on the FEMA buyout of the hospital clinic at 134 West 6th. We've contracted with an appraiser, title company, and the asbestos inspection company. Next, let's see, Wednesday at 2, the Gasconade County and FEMA will be meeting to discuss floodplain issues and updates on various special flood hazard areas. That'll happen right here at City Hall at the Police Department.
Is that what this is?
No.
Still waiting on word from the Community Development Block Grant people for the demolition of the 3 properties. I talked to grant administrator today, and she still has no word from CDBG. Hope to hear from them anytime. And also still waiting on confirmation on the grant through MoDOT Aviation for the airport runway. And as the mayor mentioned, we'll be at the MRPC meeting on Thursday to discuss transportation needs for the region. That's it.
Okay. We have some ordinances to discuss. One is the second. Dave, will you help us with those?
Yep. First is bill number 2018-35, an ordinance to adopt the 2015 editions of the International Building Code, the International Residential Code, the International Plumbing Code, the International Fire Code, the International Mechanical Code, the International Fuel Gas Code, and the 2014 National Electric Code with certain amendments.
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
We have a motion that's made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's carried.
Next is bill number 2018-36 on for second reading. An ordinance to approve and to authorize the execution of a commercial lease by and between the city of Herman, Missouri and Gasconade County, Missouri for certain space in the City Hall building.
I make a motion to approve that.
Second.
We have a motion made and I have Dave as second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's carried.
Next on for first reading is bill number 2018-37, an ordinance to approve and to authorize the execution of a municipal services and material contract by and between the City of Herman, Missouri and Royal Flush Plumbing Service.
This is for the ballpark.
Yeah.
The ballpark restrooms are probably going
Everybody's
to
aware of what it's for.
I move to approve.
I second.
We have a motion made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're going to read this twice, Dave, because we took a little time to get it through the Buckley. Let's catch up.
For second reading, bill number 2018-37, an ordinance to approve and to authorize the execution of a municipal services and material contract signed between the City of Herman, Missouri and Royal Flush Plumbing Service.
Have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Dave Fairbrother, second. Made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's carried.
Next is bill number 2018-38 for first reading, an ordinance to amend Schedule 5, parking during certain hours on certain streets prohibited of Title 3 Traffic Code of the Herman Municipal Code.
This is the school.
It is. This is for the safety of the kids. It is just being a continued problem out there. The traffic and the way people drive and everything around those children when they're entering school and leaving school. I'm just about pulling what little hair I have left out over this. This is something that the school requested, and I actually think it's a very good idea. There will be no room for any kids to dart out into traffic because the traffic just, we can't seem to get it slowed down through there. So I will move to approve this.
We have a motion made, seconded by Alderman Cox. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion's carried. Does that need to be?
I think it would be wise to do it again.
Let's read that again.
All right, for second reading, bill number 2018-38, an ordinance to amend Schedule 5, parking during certain hours on certain streets prohibited of Title 3 Traffic Code of the Herman Municipal Code.
I'll make a motion, second read.
Second?
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are now down to Resolution 1262.
Resolution 1262 is a resolution stating the City of Herman's intent to seek funding through the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program and authorizing the mayor to secure funding and identifying a project manager. So this is exactly what it says, and what Alderman Fairbrother had held up earlier is the Exhibit A to this. Whenever we acquire these properties through these grants, we have to do so subject to these restrictions that are attached, and it might be possible to convey property or do things with property, but those restrictions always have to be honored from here on out.
And this is for the property on 6th Street?
Yes.
That would be.
This is the flood hazard mitigation.
I'm gonna say, 'cause it didn't have an
It's a
address,
formality. It's a formality.
Okay. Just trying to clarify that. That's what it was for.
Any more discussion? Motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
We have a motion made to accept and a second. All in favor? Say aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. We're on to old business. Right? Okay. I didn't skip anything tonight. Transportation ordinance update. I've met with the providers of transportation that I know about. I believe we have a new one that's just got a business license last week. What is the name of that one, Trish?
KD Shuttles.
KD Shuttles. And I have not met with them, but Trish has talked to them. I have discussed with Mr. Sanderlin and the Herman Crown Suites driver the intent for us to have an ordinance that actually is, the purpose of which is to protect the city. This is not to say this would have had any effect on an accident or anything of that sort. But Mr. Sanderlin and the Crown Suites are fine with it. They have nothing to, we've added what they want. So we're going to proceed on with development of this, and it'll come to this board as we get there. So that's that. Now we come to a long-range street repair discussion. About a month ago, Alderman Cox posed the possible solution to our street problem as being a bond issue. And the bond issue was an idea he had, and either asked me or I volunteered, I think he asked me, anyway, to work on it, and I have. And I've kept him in apprised of this as well as I have some of the other aldermen. And I have worked with Joey McCliney, and he's out in the audience, he came tonight, to express, well, Joey, why don't you come forward, to tell us what he has found about a bond issue. We need to work on immediately on a map of the streets that we think we're going to do, and the priority of those, as well as get better estimates from West. Let's get somebody, West or some other paving company, to give us up-to-date cost estimates. But what Joey has developed is basically 5, you might think of it as 5 separate bonds, all approved at the same time, covering 20 years, and we would draw down $1 million plus each draw every 4 years, I guess. He'll tell us about it. And in the meantime, we have an opportunity to pay this down. So the amount outstanding never gets to be such a burden on people that is unwieldy. And it produces 8-point-something million and should be about, it would go on property tax, and it should produce an increase of about $10 to $10.75 a month for the average house in Herman. And we may not need 8 million, but I think after looking at some of the numbers, it's possible. So, Joey, why don't you tell us what you did? And
well, first of all, you guys know that, unfortunately, streets generate 0 revenue. And so there's no way to do a revenue bond for a street, unlike your water and sewer system. So the logical way to do something like this, and the way most cities tackle it, is they vote general obligation bonds secured by the property taxes. The problem with that solution is that how do you do 22 miles of street, vote your maximum bond issue size for something that doesn't last 10 years? And you can go only 20 years on a general obligation bond. So imagine how disappointed you'd be if you issued $8 million in bonds, and in 10 years you had to redo your streets or repair all the streets, but you still had the $8 million or a large chunk of that $8 million still outstanding for another 10 years. And so what the mayor asked me to do is he first said, what do we do? How do we go about it? And so what you have in front of you is a proposed resolution, and the deadline for the April ballot is I believe January 22nd. So review it. It's only one page. The question, obviously, that is left is the amount if you decide to move forward on something like this. Also, it is a very broad street question. It allows for streets, curbs, gutters. And did I put sidewalks in there? Because I should have. And sidewalks. The mayor drove me around town, and sidewalks are desperately needed in a lot of places. So that's the first thing you have to tackle is if in fact you want to look at a tax increase, how do we do it, and how much do we want to do? And so I also have, Mayor, this is what you're talking about, correct? Mm-hmm. And so let me keep one of these. So what I thought is, how do we pay for something? How do we not get that levy too high? Because obviously nobody wants to pay for $8 million, but how do we continually update our streets? And so if it's 8.8 blocks to a mile? Right. Is that what you, I had no idea, by the way. So 8.8 blocks, 8.8 blocks times 30,000. $264,000 times, you probably already did this, times 22 is 5.8 million. It's a good chunk of change. You'll notice at the top is your assessed valuation. That's the 2000 on this page that I just handed out. That's the 2018 assessed valuation. It's $40,957,000. You have the maximum you could issue in general obligation bonds is 8.19 million. That would be the maximum. You can do 20% of your assessed valuation. And so, talking with the mayor, talking with Mark, we said, okay, nobody wants to take an $8 million hit on a levy. So how do we affordably do this? And the way you do it is you take that $8 million and you vote it once. You're right now spending somewhere between $110,000 and $150,000 in your budget. Well, let's triple that. And so what you would do is, assuming we pass this election, year zero is my base year, you would issue $1,030,000 in bonds. That's the bonds issued. And then you would spend it over the next 4 years. So you'd spend $280,000, $250,000, $250,000. Now, what that allows you to do is, first of all, you're issuing very short-term bonds. It almost triples your budget on what you're doing on the streets. And you're paying it back, but you're also keeping the levy, the total levy, under $1. So just that amount is roughly 65 cents. But your total citywide levy would be under $1. And so doing it that way keeps it that way. Then in year 2, you would go ahead and you would issue another $1 million or $1.1 million. Again, in year 4, you would issue $1.1 million. In year 8, you'd issue $1.2 million. Year 12, you'd issue $1.3 million. And you can see all the way down to year 20, I'm issuing bonds. In that year, it would be $1.6 million, and we still have $470,000 in bonds authorized but unissued. But what you're doing is you're keeping your levy constant. And you're always doing projects, and you're going to be doing roughly three times as many projects as you currently can with your budget. You're keeping your levy low, and you're proceeding, you're moving everything forward. Now, if your assessed valuation grows faster, you could do projects a little faster. Again, keeping your levy constant, keeping your levy affordable. If your projects, let's assume if I project 10% growth over 10 years for someone's assessed valuation, if I ever projected anything like that, I can guarantee it would happen. It would just happen in the 10th year. And so for 9 years, you'd be mad at me. So in this, when you're taking it as chunks like this, in year 4, you can reevaluate. Was this a burden to the community? Do we need to back it off? Do we need to lower the levy? Did we hit a recession? You don't have to follow this plan, but you have a plan. And you can constantly put in bonds as you need them, as you go. You can decide this is going to be a better plan every 6 years, but you have the authority to do it, and you can keep going. Now, let's say you roll around year 20, literally you have $470,000 available, this very last, that's what's remaining, that $470,000 right there, and authorized but unissued. You can then go to your, and assuming this has worked perfectly, and I'm not saying every 3 years you're issuing or every 5 years you're issuing, it's just worked nicely. However, you guys work it out every 4 years or every 3 years. In year 20, you can comfortably go back to your electorate and say, we want to continue this for another 20 years. We want to continue on with this GO process and re-vote it then. So instead of having to vote a bond issue every 4 years or every 5 years for just projects you can afford, you vote it once and you spend it over this amount of time. Now, one question that always comes up, you only pay for what you borrow. So having $8 million in authorized, you'll always only have roughly $1 to $1.5 million outstanding. So you will only be paying on that $1 to $1.5 million outstanding. So it'll keep that levy at a reasonable amount. You'll have excellent funds finally in your street system to keep things moving forward, and you'll have a low levy. So it seems to be a logical approach if it's something you guys agree with.
Yeah, I think what it does is allows us, as Dave calls it, he's always said we're on a pay-as-we-go plan. And basically, we borrow and we pay it back, and we borrow and we pay it back. It keeps it reasonable. It's not borrow 8 and all of a sudden we've got to pay off $8 million. It's we borrow 1.03 or whatever, we pay it back. So we don't end up with a monster credit card bill. So I think if we decide to actually go this route, it's a good plan. How do you all feel? You said it's sprung on you, but I know you'd like to make sure, Joey, that everybody gets your card. And your name's down here, so I think...
Yeah, it is at the bottom, but it's...
Then they should feel free, I think,
to
contact you directly if they have any questions whatsoever. Do you have anything now? If not, I'm good with that. If you'd stick around for a minute.
Sure.
Anybody? Bruce?
I think it's a great idea. I'm just a firm believer, as many complaints we have about the streets, that if the citizens want this to be done, this is about the only avenue we have. It's just that we have to educate them so they understand what the heck we're doing. I mean, it passed before, but didn't get a majority, so.
Everybody's always looking for somebody else to pay for it. That's not gonna happen in this case, so.
Anyway, yeah.
Joey, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot here or anything, but we thought that if the issue, if we decided to do it, and it was done in April, it would take 57% to pass it. And I heard somewhere if it was in August, it would be 67%.
2/3 majority is the requirement for August. April, it's only it's a 4/7 or 57%.
Okay, well, if that's the case, then that should,
And the other thing is we have an election in April, we'll save on the cost.
We'll save
Election
costs.
is,
Yeah.
or
Exactly.
Whatever you call it.
I don't know what you call it, but it's money. It's money. Okay, Joey, we'll come back, maybe stick around for
Sure.
a while. We gotta get through some of this stuff here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
New business, I don't have any,
I got one item.
okay?
I've had several complaints in the alley between 2nd and 3rd Street, west of Mozart. Between Mozart and Washington. Derelict cars sit in the
Okay.
backyard. Would you look at that, please?
Darren?
What is the complaint?
Derelict cars.
I can't
Derelict.
hear you. Derelict cars.
Cars.
Between second, the alley between second
Between
and third.
2nd and 3rd Street. From Mozart up to Washington.
Right.
There may be more, but that's the complaint I got.
They're next to that lot that, remember, we were afraid was gonna cave in. Right now, I think that's what.
John,
Right in that area, yes.
Yeah.
we have an extra copy for him, don't we?
Yes, John.
You can have a copy. Where can you get that?
Thank you.
Under new business, I have two short things. Park board meeting the other night. Lois gave a presentation on what they're doing with the restoration of the bandstand, and the park board approved her plan. But in doing that, they're going to actually physically move the bandstand 15 feet from the foundation where it is now. And I didn't know, I just wanted everybody on the board to be aware that this is in process. It ain't gonna happen tomorrow, but I don't,
They're not gonna do it.
right. I just, I don't think we have to vote on anything like that.
To the
Do
south.
we? Okay, but I just wanted everybody to be aware because they did approve that at the park board meeting.
Is that closer to the rotunda?
It would be to the south.
To the
where it
south.
is now.
Okay, and which?
That way they don't have to take that really big tree down.
If you're standing on,
Towards the swing.
yes, if you're standing on Washington, looking at the rotunda, pick up the bandstand, move it 15 feet to the right.
I'd like to take credit for this because that was my idea.
Well, whoever, anyway, it's in motion. I just
Okay.
wanted everybody to be aware.
Would you carry back to the park board that this needs to be given credit to Alderman Pierce?
Yeah, I think I suggested moving it to the north, so maybe I don't get
I'll try to
that.
spell his name right.
Yeah, would you please? Thank you.
The other thing I have under new business is the Memorial Park is moving along and we would like, I don't know how this gets done, but ordinance 420.130 is the banners in commercial district. We would like to have it written in that ordinance that there will be no banners within the Memorial Park boundaries in the future. Commercial ban, In other words, once this is done, it's a memorial park. We don't want somebody advertising my mouse racing or whatever,
Okay, is there
I
any
think
objection to
that's
that?
none whatsoever.
So say
Can we
that
just go ahead and get Dave to write that up?
you said
Please.
commercial, but you mean nonprofits as
Or
well.
what, we just don't want any banners, however
No
it needs to be worded, I'm not
Treat it
sure.
like hallowed ground?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe.
Basically, because tomorrow they're gonna bring the other monument, the base monument in, and they're doing the concrete, so it's gonna fall together pretty rapidly here. And
Who approves banners there in the first place?
Well, I was gonna say, that's our property.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that I think that falls under what city administrator.
But people tend just to put them up,
but if it's in writing, at least we have something.
That's a can do.
If we take somebody's banner down, maybe they won't be mad because we can say it's here. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Makes
thank
sense.
you, that's all I have.
The minutes, what should we do with them?
Move to approve.
Second.
Made and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Invoices for payment.
Make motion to pay the bills.
Second.
Made and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Conditional use permit, Alex and Amanda Stimmy, Clinton Mansion or unoccupied guest house, 108 East 2nd Street, expiration of 3-month renewal. We have someone here from Clinton Mansion. Do we have, what is the pleasure? Do we have questions for her, or should we just move on?
I talked to Alex, and she's probably going to relay this anyway. He said he did have a fireplace.
I have inspections if you want copies of it.
From
Of the
Fire escape.
fire escape.
Okay.
That was one of the complaints from the citizen
Right.
that has been inspected, and we have her contract here. That was one of the requests.
Do you, yeah, I just brought extra copies.
Do we want to approve this again for 3 months, or what do we want to do? It's up to you.
I would say as long as we're made aware of any change in the management agreement, if somehow you leave, we should be notified of that. At one point, they had agreed to do it with a neighbor. Within a month or two, that relationship soured.
And there was no
So,
written agreement.
right, and so that's the reason why we want this, is to make sure that it's being handled, you know, it's being managed
Well,
under
they have to
contract.
give me a month, I have to give them a month at that time, and we would forward that info to you.
Right.
Are you familiar with any restrictions or anything that might be placed in? Do we have some conditional use permit restrictions that were agreed to with that plan? Probably not, if there are any.
I think, you know, Alex, with this situation and that, and she's managing the place, that they are getting things done that they promised they were going to do.
Yeah.
And I think it's redundant to do a 3-month thing. I think we should go for a year like we do with everybody else.
Yeah.
And is it going to be 3 bed and breakfast rooms, not 6 or 7?
No, we have 4.
Not more than 4?
Not more than 4.
And are you advertising more than 4?
No.
No, so you're just advertising 4?
4.
You do understand that a conditional use permit can be revoked at any time for any violations of that, correct? Okay, just make sure that's clear.
I would like to make the motion to approve a 1-year renewal as long as the contract remains in force, the management agreement.
I'll second that.
We have a motion made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for being patient.
Wasn't expecting that long meeting, were you?
It was a good evening.
2019 liquor license renewals. Trish, you want to explain what we have?
These are just the annual licenses that come due in January. There are just a couple that have not yet paid. We'd like them to do it early, but technically they have until December 31st, and I will make sure those are not issued until they are paid.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the liquor licenses.
Second.
A motion's made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's carried. Approved bids for Pee Wee basketball from Wilding Photos for pictures and from Riverbank Apparel for t-shirts.
Make a motion to approve the
Second.
We have a motion made and duly seconded. All in favor say aye.
I abstain.
Any opposed? Motion's carried. With 1 abstention. Special event application, Robert Thiessen Memorial Scholarship Fundraiser Dueling Piano Event, Amphitheater, September 13, 2019.
Oh, dueling pianos, that sounds kind of dangerous.
Make a motion to approve it.
Second.
All right. We always wanted to duel in town. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, we have no citizens' comments, because there aren't any citizens left. Closed session. We have a closed session. Look, we'll see it, okay. Stand by. Okay, we want to go into closed session?
I move we go into closed session for the purpose of dealing with matters relating to legal action, cause of action, litigation, or privileged communication between the city's representatives and its attorneys.
Okay, there's a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Let's vote. Dave?
Aye.
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 We're now in closed session. Thank you, Mr. Mike.
I can say that if there's any